Please welcome Tien Tzuo.
Thanks, Kate. So as Kate mentioned, we're a software company. We're a technology company. We help companies monetize their customer relationships through subscription business models. And so we help technology companies, telecom companies, media companies, consumer services companies. In the immediate space, we focus on paywalls. If you really net it down, we help companies set up paywalls. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, because this is one of the big choices that media companies face. Do I set up a paywall, or do I not set up a paywall? And because of what we do, we have a little bit of a perspective, if you will, in how our customers really approach this question. I wanted to share some of those thoughts with you. But just to put it in context, there's a lot of optimism in the media industry today, which is fantastic, but because it was only a short time ago, in 2009 even, right, just a few years ago, where people were really decrying the death of the media industry, the death of the journalism. And this is an article that we pulled up in 2009 that actually mapped out the newspaper extinction timeline across the world of how it was in the start in the US, moved to Canada, and all the way down to, I don't know why it is, but Argentina was really the last place that you were going to see journalists across the world. And why was that? You know, these are all information that you guys know, right? The shift to digital was really taking away the advertising dollar, right? That $10 would shrink to $1 as advertising shifted from the print medium to the digital medium. And alongside with that, there was this feeling that content had to be free, right? This whole idea of the internet and free, and people won't pay for content. It's a commodity. There's no way I can charge for this stuff online. You know, in the technology industry, sometimes, you know, we joke about how, thank God, we didn't think that software would be free when it moved into the internet, because that would have destroyed our business. And so what you have is declining revenues, right? Not really a lot of ideas of how to monetize and generate new revenue streams. There was a round of cost cutting that cut into journalists and actually the content. And even now this week, the Pew report said 31% of the people, you know, in America actually said the news quality is not quite what it used to be in the same sources I go to, right? So you get a declining cycle, right? A race to the bottom, if you will, and not really a way out of the dilemma. Well, there have been companies that set up paywalls, right? The Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal. There was a thought that said maybe it's really just the financial publications that can actually charge for the content. And about a year ago, the New York Times really got a lot of attention for saying, we're going to set up paywalls. We're going to give it a try. Enough is enough. Declining revenues really doesn't make any sense. We're going to find our way to get through the situation. A lot of people said it's not going to work, right? All you're going to do is decelerate, you know, advertising revenue even further. And lo and behold, a year later, people are seeing that experiment actually worked, right? The New York Times is actually, their paywall is actually starting to be successful. And so now all of a sudden, towards the end of 2012, we're seeing the tone of the conversation change. The tone of conversation changed towards optimism, hope. There are signs that the industry perhaps has bottomed out, right? In the New York Times, they're saying, well, subscription sales are now outpacing the decline in advertising. Revenues are actually overall starting to increase. The Financial Times is saying our digital subscribers now outnumber our print subscribers. You're seeing news elsewhere in other industries, right? Pearson's saying overall, as an organization, digital revenue is outstripping non-digital revenue. And now you're seeing a lot of predictions really on the upswing, right? Up and to the right versus down and to the right. Magazine subscriptions, as it moves to digital magazine subscriptions are likely to triple in the next few years. More and more organizations now, with the success of other paywalls like the New York Times, like the Journal, like News International here in London, are saying we're going to set up paywalls. And so if you look across a lot of the newspaper groups, a lot of the media groups, the percentage of paywalls that exist across all their properties is starting to increase more and more. There's a prediction in Western Europe that says digital revenue in the next few years will actually increase by 65%, from 6.2 billion to 10.2 billion. And Wall Street is starting to be a believer too. So some of the top 3 newspapers, if you look at their stock prices over the last few years, it's on the up and up. And you know, there's a report out there that's starting to hit from Michael Novarkis from the University of Houston that's actually showing, University of Texas in Austin, that's actually showing, well, you know, he compared the success of paywalls or the impact of paywalls on major newspapers, sort of the 6-month period before the paywall was launched and the 6-month period after, and he's found some interesting findings. he's found that paywalls, not universally, but they can work. And they often, not only can they possibly stem the decline of print circulation, but oftentimes they actually can increase a little bit the decline of print circulation. And so in the New York Times, you're seeing that print circulation actually has flattened out, or the decline has actually flattened out. In the Wall Street Journal, they've had a paywall for 15 years, and during that whole 15 years, print circulation has only declined by 15% as compared to 50, 60, 70% in many other newspapers, right? The Dallas Morning News actually saw the weekday decline, but we're actually seeing in some cases an increase in the Sunday circulation, and then there might be a pattern where people like to read daily news in a digital format, but they actually prefer the print version when they're at home on the weekend on a Sunday. And so we're actually seeing that paywalls can work. There are lots of cases where paywall can work. In fact, this study actually showed if you break up all the newspapers in a national, regional, and local, Michael's study was actually the paywalls actually work a little bit better for local and national than they do for regional. And you can sort of bring your own hypotheses of why. And so we believe that paywalls can work. That's the success that we see. But where do we kind of go from there? Right? If the industry was sort of in a debt spiral in 2009, it's hitting this point where some newspapers are seeing that paywalls can actually work. There's a sense that perhaps the industry has bottomed out and revenues are starting to come back and is starting to manage that transition to digital. Well, are we in this new normal? Are we in this new normal where the media industry does not have the revenues it has, it's smaller, and it needs to be a smaller industry going forward? Or is there an opportunity in this shift to digital to say, we don't really accept that. We actually think that we can actually reignite growth in this industry and grow much, much bigger and actually reestablish the heyday that we once had. And so when we talk to a lot of newspapers and a lot of industries, that media companies that set up paywalls, and we look at the successful paywalls and the unsuccessful paywalls, such as Variety. Variety set up a paywall, and there's been some news in the last few months of how it has not fared on the shift of paywalls and the shift to digital, as well as some of these other organizations. What we find is that it's not really just about the paywall, that the organizations that focus on customer relationships, managing their relationships, packaging, pricing, innovation, are the ones that are able to be successful with the paywalls versus the ones that are not. And so what we see, if you really net it down, the word paywall is an interesting word, right? It's a word that's only used in the media and the publishing industries, right? If you go to the technology industries where we're from, where we charge our customers, we don't call it a paywall, we just simply call it a monetization strategy, a pay strategy, a freemium strategy. It's not really about the paywall. It's really more about the customer. It's about the customer and returning to this view that the consumers of your content, the consumers of the news, the people that read the news, they're not readers, they're not just readers, they're the customer. The advertisers are certainly a big part of the equation, right? They subsidize the business model, they fund the business model, but they're not the customer. It's really the readers and the consumers of the content that are the customer. And when you look at it through that lens, what you see is there actually is a lot of hope. In the shift to digital, the consumer, the readers of the content are actually more hungry for news than they have ever been before. This is from the same report that came out this week, the Pew report, that says 31% of people actually spend more time with news in the digital format than they did in the print format. And 43% of them actually go to multiple sources for news because it's easy to go to multiple places, where before they would just look at the same newspaper that they would look at previously. And so in this digital world, people actually want more news. They're more connected, right? They're more connected to the world, and they're actually hungry for more information. We did our own panel yesterday where we brought together a few of the leaders, if you will, in the media and publishing space. And so we had Tom Hall, the head of future technologies at Pearson. We had Andrew Lampoltang at Fairfax. If you read a little bit about Fairfax, they're undergoing their whole transformation, and Andrew was really brought in to be the CTO of this Fairfax of the Future Initiative. We brought together Christina Scott, the CIO of the Financial Times, Neil Robinson, one of the managing directors at IPC, right? And Kate Vanek-Smith, the CMO of News International, right? The Times, the Sunday Times, and the Sun here in London. And we did a panel of paywalls. And what we found was this group of people did not sort of decry the paywall and the decline of the industry as a new normal that the industry has faced, but they actually saw a very optimistic and positive outlook for the future in terms of finding ways of monetizing or building new revenue streams in the digital world. And so what they really came down to, we're going to have this video in the panel contents online soon, is that the future has to start with this whole concept of the customer, of building deep customer relationships. And if you look at some of the things that they're doing, and there's some of the things that the other leaders are doing, you see this pattern. So it's things like really focusing on creating a new experience for the consumer, for the reader, in the digital world that they could not access in the print world, right? And so organizations like, and newspapers like the Welt Group in Germany, they're actually taking a digital-first view of creating content and news, and before they even think about the print. It all comes out at the same time. There's a lot of investment in video and interactive content and conversations and comments, right? It's a much, much deeper experience. It's more aligned to the type of experiences that people are hungry for in the digital world, and the shift to digital really is an opportunity to bring that out. They're looking at increased geographical reach. I think it's no coincidence that the New York Times is actually releasing other language versions of their fundamental newspapers, because they're realizing that before they were limited to the tri-state area as far as their trucks can go, and if you actually subscribe to the New York Times, say down in Sydney, you get news that was 2 days old by the time you got it into a print edition. But now on a tablet, everybody's got the same experience. Everybody's got the same experience, and the shift to digital actually means that you can increase your subscriber base. You're seeing a lot of newspapers and magazines really go overseas to, maybe through expats, maybe through other languages, to really increase their reach and find new revenue streams. Innovative content monetization, the whole idea of product line extensions, if you will, that you see in many other industries is starting to see come into the media and publishing industry. Here's an example of how Pearson is taking a lot of their content from the Financial Times, from Penguin Books, from the Eyewitness travel guides, from recipes, right, the Chronicles of Narnia, and they're making all that content available online for developers. So if you're building an application on an iPad or an Android device and you need recipes or weather or thesaurus or references, you can tap into their content, and they're finding other ways of monetizing the content that they can never do before, right? Innovative ways of releasing. Katie, News International, talked a lot about how News International is starting to buy the rights to football teams. And you can see as we go into football season, they're going to find a lot of other ways of providing services to their existing customer base to drive new revenue streams that go beyond the news article, beyond the piece of content. We're seeing a lot of cross-content bundling. The classic example here is people get the Sunday paper home, they throw away 7 sections, they read the 2 sections of what they want, right? Why is that? Because of the limitations of the physical medium. And now, this industry has the chance to unbundle its content, right? Unpack it, rebundle it in ways that make a lot more sense for consumers, and provide a different set of value propositions, if you will, benefits, bundles to the consumers that really match their needs. And the last thing is this whole idea of a predictable revenue model. One of the problems in the last few years is that, being addicted to the drug of advertising, which is a fickle revenue source, when it goes away, it wreaks havoc on the business model. But when you have a loyal set of customers, a base of customers, and you're building your revenue off those customers, and they have an association with you, right? They actually, your brand represents something to them. They're not going to go away overnight, and that gives you a predictable revenue base to experiment, to grow, and to really find new ways to tap into new revenue streams. And so when you just look at these 5 ideas, and there's dozens of ideas out there, the idea of increasing your geographical reach, right? Unbundling and rebundling the content that you have. The idea of delivering deeper, richer experiences and deeper customer engagements. The idea of having product line extensions, of going beyond the news articles into a whole bunch of other areas that your customer base will actually pay you for, right? And the idea of building a predictable revenue model from which to build a business. And we think it's time to kind of go beyond the paywall. It's not really about the paywall. It's not really about setting up a toll booth for people to pay 10 cents an article, $50 a month, whatever it happens to be. It's really about reinventing your relationship with your customers, tapping into what your brand represents to your customers, and we like to think of that as going beyond the paywall to what we'll call a Paywall 2.0 strategy, right? Where it's not about a toll gate, it's about business model transformation. It's not about rigid monetization strategies where you just reproduce the pricing plans that are available and the home delivery model, but it's about flexible monetization strategies to give people different offerings what they want, right? It's not about thinking about the paywall as a center, but thinking about the relationship with the customer as a centerpiece of your business. It's not about a splinter subscriber view where you have 15 different titles, 15 different mastheads, and you view customers as really belonging to the masthead, but instead of viewing a single customer database, that you can actually cross-sell and upsell different products, different bundles across whatever titles that really make sense. It's not about a single platform monetization where, this is how I monetize my home delivery, this is how I monetize my web, and on the iPad, I go through the Apple App Store. It's about a single monetization strategy for a single customer base across all the titles, all the properties, all the bundles that you can have. The technologies are here today, and certainly this is one of the things that we do. We're the paywall behind the Times and the Sunday Times of London. We're at the FT. We're at Pearson. The technologies are available today. It's not just us. It's Salesforce. It's PayPal. It's some of the sponsors here like Chartbeat. There's a lot of technologies available now. They're all in the cloud, so to speak, right? So they don't take 2 years to implement. I think our whole project with News International probably took about 6 months to get the initial paywall up and running. We're doing something very similar at Fairfax, where it's only going to take about 6 months to set up their paywalls as a start. We could do in 4 months, you can do in 3 months, but the technologies are all here today, and what we like to think is that stories are here today too. One of the terms that came up in yesterday's discussion that we had about paywalls is this whole idea of collective courage. Collective courage, and we thought that to be a very powerful concept that says, the media industry is certainly in a big state of transformation. There's certainly a lot of unknowns. There's certainly a lot of negative stories and failures, if you will, right? But if the industry would come together with the collective courage to enter this new world, to enter the new digital world, tap into new ways to build, to reconnect with their readers, reconnect on what they represent to the readers, and find new revenue streams, that this is not a new normal that the industry will go to where revenues aren't what they used to be, but there's actually an opportunity to tap into and grow into a vibrant and exciting industry. And the last thing I will say is, it's really time to start this journey today, right? We all know the importance that the media industry has in our democracy. We all know the importance that journalism has in our democracy as the fourth estate, if you will. And it's really think it's really time to start this journey. And we encourage you to join the other companies that we see. Our goal is to share the stories out here of success and to create, a collective courage, if you will, to kind of go into this new world of digital together and really establish the media industry and the journalism industry as one of the most important facets of our society today. Thank you very much, and that's it for my comments.
Great.
I'll take questions and answers.
Who has a question for Tien? That was really, I think, quite inspiring. Does somebody want to ask him a question, or I can ask him a question to start us off? I'll ask him a question to start us off, but if you have a question, get ready. What I think was interesting about your approach was, I think you're right. I think we have seen it as either be a paywall or don't be a paywall. And it's much more complicated and, let us say, flexible, and the whole experience has to change. The whole relationship has to change. And that's really hard because you've got a cultural issue going on as well, right? I mean, it seems to me that you have two issues to deal with that I'd like you to talk about. The cultural issue inside the media companies to get there, to actually change their relationship with their users, viewers, consumers. And the other one is, how do you find out actually it is what they want? In other words, what is it an FT subscriber really wants that they're willing to pay for? What is it a Sunday Times person really wants that they will willing to subscribe for? Is that where you have to spend a lot of time?
Yeah, so having grown up in New York, I watched what the New York Times has done very closely over the last 18 months. And people talk about how the New York Times seems to be swinging, right? They set up a hard paywall, they set up a soft paywall, they raise their prices, they lower their prices. And they sometimes, in the tone of the conversation, people talk about that as a negative thing. But what we find is that is the journey. That is a journey to say, how do I know? How do I know? Is to experiment. Is to experiment and find ways to is it 4 articles for free? Is it 2 articles for free? There's no way really to know up front, right? You just kind of have to go into it, experiment with your customers, right? Talk to them, do lots of surveys, do lots of focus groups, And what we find is the interesting about our technology is our ability to let customers experiment. That's really, the reason they come to us is not because necessarily just want to set up a simple paywall.
So they can tweak it.
They want to tweak it,
yeah.
right? They want to tweak it. They want to launch new pricing plans.
Right.
If you go to the Times and the Sunday Times, as I do over the last 6 months, you'll see that every 2 weeks they're changing that user experience, with the goal of really trying to figure out how to optimize it.
In terms of what consumers want, I mean, I know, for instance, bringing up the Times, they're offering a lot of things like, get extra tickets or there's a lot of sort of, I would call them premium experiences that they're putting on.
Yeah.
Is that what everyone's doing? Is that sort of one of the sine qua nons of this new world?
So in yesterday's panel, the whole idea of saying, well, is it a subscriber or is it a membership conversation came up, and Katie talked about Times Plus, and what they found is for their subscribers that actually sign up, become a Times Plus member, where they do get special access to events, they're much less likely to churn. And they said the annual churn rate is down to 2% for that customer base.
What's the usual churn?
She didn't say that,
okay.
But it sounded like 2% was very positive.
Probably higher.
Probably higher.
Does anyone have a question for Tien? No? Well, I can sit here and talk to you all day. We have a panel coming next, or in a few speeches, that will talk about this whole area. So if you're around,
Sure.
maybe you can be involved in that too.
Absolutely.
But I thought that was really interesting, and I think it's what you say. It gives us light at the end of the tunnel. We have to not think of this as a negative thing. We have to take forward, embrace it, and move forward. And I think it's very, very inspiring. So thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Could you please join me in thanking Tien?